So thank you for coming to the third forum, but the Whitman override. I'm Justin Evans, member of the Select Board. With me presenting, we'll have Sean Kane, Carl Kowalski if he wants to, other members of the board, Kathleen Otina, the chair of the Finance Committee, and we've got a number of department heads, elected officials here to answer your questions. This is the third and final forum before town meeting next Monday. We'll be right back here at 7:30. I imagine the biggest question at town meeting will be about the override. So a couple of slides, probably about 15 of them, we'll try and get through and then open the floor to any questions you have for the board or the department heads. So at a glance, Whitman faces a projected $2 million budget deficit for fiscal 26. The Select Board's proposal is a $2 million Prop 2.5 override. That equates to about $371 annually to the average single-family home. That's a $495,000 home. If the override's rejected, the projected cuts include reductions in staff and services across the board to close the gap. It'll be shared across every department. So the projection from the school committee currently is about 24 positions, and the town, we're projecting about 14 positions. That will obviously change in the event of a failed override. School committee has budget autonomy. We'll reassess the towns with a new budget, and the town will adjust the budget to present to town meeting accordingly. But at this moment, this is what we expect. The two major decision dates that are coming up is Monday night, May 5th, the annual town meeting, where town meeting, our legislative body sets the budget for the town for the year. And then May 17th at the annual town election, an election is required to raise the levy limit by a Prop 2.5 override vote. I did want to take a look back to 2021. The Select Board adopted the following as part of a 5-year strategic plan. We adopted a mission that was to provide responsible, sustainable services by fostering strong community relationships for our citizens, future citizens, and visitors. We set a town vision, a welcoming, collaborative community that values its history to ensure a successful future. And we set the town's values, sustainable, supportive, respectful, participatory government. And wanted to highlight that to reach these, to achieve this plan, we set a strategic priority, a financial one, of a financial strategy that delivers the level of services that citizens expect. And to expand on that, and I think Sean wants to talk on this a little bit.
I like this slide specifically because of strategic priority, where it says a financial strategy that delivers the level of services that our citizens expect. Basically, people will come up to you and they'll say, why doesn't the town just live within their means? I have to live within my means. When I'm at work, my boss says, I have to manage something. Why don't I just stay within my budget? Why do they keep asking us for more money? And I think it's an important question because we fall back on our mission and our strategic priorities that say the town's purpose is to provide a level of services that you've come to expect. There's a deficit when our revenue exceeds, when our expenditures exceed our revenue. There's a gap. So we can either increase revenue through an override, and some people would say, it's $400 a month. It's going to save $400 a year. Thank you. It's going to save about 38 positions. I can do that. Even though on top of the other debt, I think I can do that. But somebody else might say, I can't do that. These are difficult times, and I don't know if I can afford the override. For us in the Select Board, our job isn't to sell the override one way or the other. Our job is to say, listen, if you want to keep the level of services that we currently have, we need an override for these reasons. And then the town itself at town meeting and at the ballot will decide which way we go.
To expand on that strategic priority, the financial one, I just want to kind of dial in on the, where is it? The initiative. So a process to inform when and how much new revenue is needed. So, that's kind of the driving factor for why we're presenting these forums. We as Sean mentioned, we have a structural deficit where our expenditures are exceeding our revenues, and we'd like to take it to the voters to say, do you want to continue funding the government, funding the town at the level of services you've been receiving, or is it time to pull back, reduce some services, but keep the costs about where you expect them? So how did we get here? Said it a couple of times, when revenues exceed expenditures, we have excess levy capacity, and when expenditures exceed revenues, we have a structural deficit. The current structural deficit at level services is projected to be about $2 million. Last year, it was $509,000, and town meeting voted to use one-time money to bridge that gap. So that we had a gap last year. We used one-time money to close it, and this year it's grown another $1.5 million to about $2 million. Want to expand on that a little bit and see the town's revenue picture. So if you go back 20 years ago, tax levy was making up about 2/3 of the budget. Then we've got state aid, local receipts, and all other revenue that we take in. Coming up to current day, the tax levy has grown to 3/4. So we do know that more of the government services are being funded by your property taxes. It's because state aid across that entire period is almost flat. Local receipts is up a little bit. A lot of that is the change in ambulance billing. So if you look at 2019, that's when or 2020, that's when that jump is. And all others, it's other revenues. It ebbs and flows a little bit. If you look at the expenditure picture, you can see that and this is over 5 years. So this is 2019 to 2024. 2024 is the last closed budget. So it's the last year that we've closed, submitted to the state, all the money that we've spent. As you expect, the school's budget has grown, quite a bit about this, and this is all educational spending. This is Whitman Hanson. This is other vocational schools, South Shore Votech. It's grown about 35% over that 5-year period. Public safety has grown about 16%, and they took a pretty big cut back in 2020 to close a budget deficit we had back then. General government has grown about 30%. Public works has grown about 38%, although I do want to highlight that includes solid waste disposal, which is, we'd consider a fixed cost that's also growing pretty quickly. But fixed costs has been growing very quickly in the last couple of years. And I do want to dial in on two specific fixed costs. So health insurance, we participate in the Mayflower Municipal Health Group. They've been one of the best managed plans, if not the best managed plan in the state. And still, over that 5-year period, their costs have grown 18%. And almost all of that growth is in the last 2 years. If you look at those first 3, it's basically level. If we had participated in the GIC, the state provided plan, they're up about 15% this year. Plymouth County is up about, I think we're between 7 and 9%. Now we're looking at our retired employees as well. And then if you look at the Maya, which is provided by the Mass Municipal Association, that plan's also up about 15%. So we are still the best bang for our buck, but it is growing much faster than our revenues. If you'll remember, Prop 2.5 allows our tax levy revenue to increase about 2.5% plus new growth every year, and new growth has been pretty flat. The other big one, and this is the one I really want to highlight, Plymouth County retirement. So over the same 5-year period, 2019 to 2024, that's up 52%. It's grown $1 million over that period, and our budgeted amount for fiscal 26 is $3.5 million. So that is the size of our entire Park and Highway DPW budget. Our retirement assessments are basically a department at this point.
I'm going to back up just for a second and then tie in together with the fixed costs. I think this is an important side because there's some people that would argue, this shouldn't be a shared override. This should be an override on the schools. The schools, their assessment has increased significantly over the past couple of years, and this really should be a school override. And you can see that education has increased by 35%. They have some struggles in their budget that have to do with fixed costs, just like we do, right? But and I think when you say, let's compare the schools to, to public safety. The schools are going up 35%. Public safety has only gone up 16% over 5 years. But it's very difficult to compare just a department with the school because the school has all the fixed costs baked into their budget when they send us an assessment. But when you're looking at just the fire department, say, their fixed costs are separate from their department budget because the town's fixed costs are on a separate line. And that's where you can see the fixed costs up top. It has increased 37% over the last 5 years. And those fixed costs, the utilities and medical insurance, things like that, things that are very difficult for all of us to control. And this isn't just a Whitman Hanson problem, this is across the state right now. That's why you can see a number of towns on the South Shore asking for an override because these things are a significant burden. So hopefully that's helpful as to clarify why this is a shared override and not just an override for one department. And then with Plymouth County Retirement, just to expand on this just a little bit more, 52% over 5 years is a crazy number. And what we're looking at from now until 2030 is going to be as significant. So the next 5 years with Plymouth County Retirement are really, really going to significantly affect our budget in a way that's very difficult to be sustainable. However, when we get past about 2030, so about 5 years, it could go to 6 years, but about 5 years, then that number is going to significantly reduce. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel for some of our fixed costs. But over the next 5 years or so, this particular line is really going to hinder our budget.
And the fixed cost we didn't graph out is also utilities. That one's been increasing quite a bit in a pretty unsustainable manner. I'll go back and expand on what Sean said about education. So he touched on it, but I do want to emphasize that the school districts, both South Shore and Whitman-Hanson, also have to deal with the fixed costs. Whitman-Hanson has 600 plus employees. They've got retirements. They've got to fund their pensions. They've got health insurance. Those costs are on them. They've got solid waste disposal. They've got utilities. So, it is really an across-the-board issue with these fixed costs getting out of control. So to take us back to 2019, the town hired a consultant, former finance director from Duxbury, John Madden, who came in and do an analysis of the town's budget at that time, make some recommendations to us, and tell us whether or not we needed an override that year. And his recommendation was that with no changes, we would need about $1 million override. In fiscal 21, he was here during fiscal 20. That would balloon to about a $5 million override in fiscal 25. And so if we opted to make no budgetary adjustments, that's what we were looking at. So the board, I think, did the wise thing and started making adjustments. In May of 2019, actually, before we brought him in, we passed a debt exclusion for the existing police station town hall debt. That moved, $687,000 that was funded out of free cash previously, out of one-time money, into excluded debt to be funded, more directly as capital. One of the bigger changes that we made, we eliminated the ambulance receipts account and now treat ambulance receipts as general fund revenue. So that this year is about a $1.4 million shift of usable general fund revenue. And I mean, that is the revenue that the ambulance bills out to insurance companies. That's what they bring in. Similarly, we eliminated the motor vehicle fine account and now treat that as general fund income as well. We did adjust the way that we accounted for water and sewer indirect costs so that we now treat it as a budget offset in the current fiscal year rather than a sort of a reimbursement, a source of free cash the following year. And that moved that money from something that used to fund capital, and it was pretty much the same amount as the police station town hall debt. So that is where that money shifted to something that offsets the budget increases within a current fiscal year. The biggest change here, though, was the amendment to the Whitman-Hanson Regional Agreement that we will now assess each town by the state's statutory method. So the state put forward a formula that would be the default if we didn't vote otherwise. The previous regional agreement had an otherwise funding mechanism that was per pupil. We shifted during that, it was a summer outdoor town meeting during COVID, to use the statutory method. That ended up being, in this current fiscal year, it's about a $1.9 million shift, and that is from Whitman to Hanson. So the state's formula considers Hanson to be the wealthier town and puts more of the expense of the school district on them. Whitman still pays more total, but more per pupil is paid by Hanson. More recently, we made an adjustment to the way that the schools seek reimbursement for non-mandated transportation. And this is just a way that we got more money from the state. Basically, we treated the way that students were counted on the buses by a mileage basis. So kids that live further away cost more to bus, is what we told the state, which is true. And just recently, we adopted a free cash policy to plan capital needs. There's a couple of free cash policies, but the one that's really going to help us in the long run was using it for free cash. And just a couple of new revenue sources that we explored at the same time, beyond just moving money around and trying to control costs. In May of 22, we overturned the recreational marijuana prohibition. And the first store is, I believe the sign's up on Bedford Street, so it looks like it's going to open any day now. In April of last year, we increased demand fees in the ambulance billing rate. That ambulance billing rate was a significant change. It added a couple $100,000 to our revenue. And just recently, we increased parking ticket fines. That will be not quite as significant, but it will be an increase.
Yeah, I think this is important because years ago we hired a consultant to come in and say, look at our financial picture and tell us if we need an override. And then he gave us recommendations. We followed many of those recommendations so that we would not have to have an override. So we have been really struggling over the last 5 years to find a way to do everything possible to not have an override. One of his recommendations was a recommendation that was voted on at the board. It's not on here, but it has been brought up, that we should keep the town departments within 2.5, and we should keep the schools to 5%, which is a pretty good rule of thumb if you don't want to have an override. In our current situation, both the school side is above 5%, and the town side is above the 2.5%. That's why we're asking for an override. And again, to go back and give you some measure as far as how this is a shared override, right now we're asking for $2 million override. The assessment from the school is about $20 million. So 1% of $20 million is $200,000. Yeah. If you multiply that times 5, that's $1 million. Right now, their current assessment is about $2 million. So if we drop, and it's about 10%, if we drop them down to 5%, that would take $1 million off the deficit. That would still leave $1 million on the town side worth of deficit. That makes sense. So it's pretty clear, I think, just simple logic to do some quick math as to how this is both a shared override and how the Madden recommendations have helped us keep an override from as long as possible, keeping us from having an override, and how we've got to the point where we do need one now.
So what we're looking at now, some of the pressures that we're facing. On the expense side, it's inflation in the supply chain has really been going crazy since COVID. The labor market, it does cost more to bring people in right now. And I think our unions are negotiating in good faith and trying to keep up with inflation. It is a pressure on the town to keep up with that. Nothing against the unions or the town trying to bargain those, but it's just a pressure we're facing. Fixed costs, we've talked about a little bit already, but insurance, pension liability, utilities, and mandates. So for the schools, this is a particularly big one. We have a school district. They have to educate every student in that district, and if that student has special needs that can't be serviced within the district, we have to send them out, and we have to pay that full cost. There's not really a negotiation there. It is, this is a student that we have to serve, and often those are only bid by 1 or 2 different schools somewhere in the state, and we have to pay that bill. Nothing against the schools trying to find better options there, but that is the situation they're in. Likewise with school transportation, we hear about this every couple of years when they go out to bid, but there's usually only one busing company that responds, and they basically get to set their price. On police reform, it's a lesser cost increase, but it was a big change for the police department, along with the FOIA public records laws. That's been a huge burden for them. They've had to hire additional clerical and administrative staff to keep up with that. It was a cost we were not expecting. On the revenue pressures, the Prop 2.5 limit. So, what Prop 2.5 says is you take your cumulative taxable property, you can increase that by 2.5%, you set your tax rate, and you assess that out to all the taxpayers. That means that anyone's individual property taxes may go up by more or less than 2.5% any given year, but the cumulative is 2.5%. Then you're able to add new growth on top of that. New growth has been relatively stagnant. There was a boom shortly after COVID, or during COVID, and then inflation hit, supply chain crisis hit, now tariffs are hitting on lumber and drywall. I expect that to stay pretty stagnant in the near term. And flat state aid. So, unrestricted general government aid is looking like it's between 1% and 2% increase this year. That doesn't even keep up with the 2.5 limits. Chapter 70, the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District is in hold harmless minimum aid district. That means that the state's formula says that we deserve less aid than we're getting. So they are only giving us the aid that we got last year plus a little bit per pupil. It goes up at less than 1, less than a half of 1% every year.
Yeah, so our expenses are rising much quicker than our revenue. One just quick note about the labor market. We're in the process of settling with 5 unions right now, which is not really typical. So 5 unions that we've been bargaining with. I have been really impressed. We just settled with 3 of the unions, and I think their goodwill and understanding of the situation that we're in has been, I've been really impressed by it.
So back to the details of the override. What we are proposing, you'll get to vote on at town meeting and at the election, is to raise the levy limit by $2 million. The impact to the average single-family home, that's that $495,000 home, is about $371 a year, or a monthly increase of about $31 if, like me, you pay your mortgage through an escrow and you're billed monthly. And here is the proposed service cuts that are in consideration if the override fails. These are all projections. Obviously, town meeting gets to have the final say on where the money gets spent. But the school district did provide us the superintendent's expectation of where the cuts would be. School committee will vote on that if an override fails after the election. But their projection right now is 14 teachers across all schools, all grade levels, elementary, middle, high school, Whitman and Hanson. 8 paraprofessionals and the same across the board. And about 2+ admins. Admins are funny because they can maybe shift hours, maybe take some part-time, but full-time equivalent of about 2 admins. On the town side, we're looking at about 6 employees between public safety and public works. Those are more like teachers. You cut or the higher paid salaries, but you can't take a firefighter part-time. Basically, you have it or you don't. And on the general government side, equivalent of about 8 employees, that we could look at reducing hours or services across departments. Also been discussing some potential fee increases. Whitman Hanson, the superintendent did present possible athletic and extracurricular fee increases. We are exploring indirect costs for trash service, something we have not charged in the past, but we could. Currently we do not include in the trash rate the costs that it takes for the town to bill, to collect, to subsidize the senior discount. That's just absorbed currently by the DPW's budget. So that is something that we, could bill out as part of the trash service. And something that the select board discussed last year, didn't act on too many of them, was license fees. So our, used car dealer, liquor fees, that kind of thing. There's a new slide if you were here at the first forum. This is what to expect in the near term. So for ongoing debt, the DPW was borrowed and factored into your taxes already. The projection for next year is that this is all calculated on the average single-family home, that $495,000 home. The projection is that the DPW building assessment would drop about $8 for next year for the average single-family home. The Whitman Middle School is going out to bond in May, I think any day now. The expected increase for that first $30 million they're going to borrow is $342 for next year. That's not the only money they're going to borrow, so that does stand to grow a little bit in the future, but that is the first big chunk. It's about half, depending on where the borrowing comes in. South Shore Tech has been authorized to build a new school. Whitman has not sought a debt exclusion yet. We're waiting on more numbers from VOTEC, and this will be a debt exclusion probably coming to you in the near future. The high school debt does end in 2027. There's some positive news. That would be a $66 annual savings on the average single-family home. Police station town hall debt ends shortly thereafter in 2030. It's about a $92 annual savings. And then water sewer projects like the Force Main, prior projects we bonded, those are reflected in rates. We borrow it slightly differently and bill it out, but those are also definitely impacts felt by our taxpayers, at least the ones that have water and sewer. And here is I'll say good news. It's a big question coming up, a big policy question coming to the select board in a couple of years. The Plymouth County pension obligation falls off the books in 2030. As we talked about already, that's about $3.5 million right now. That's huge. About $650 of your taxes this year, if you live in an average home, goes toward that assessment. So when that falls off, it leaves us with a few options. Can we use that to grow within either grow some of our departments or get out of this difficult situation we've been in on revenue? Could we look at leaving excess levy and turning some of that money back to the taxpayers, knowing that we've been burdening them quite a bit with capital projects? Or could we take some of that, pay down OPEB or pay down capital debt to try to reduce some of these timelines. So it's something, it's the light at the end of the tunnel on total budgeting, but it's a decision that the board will have to make in a couple of years. It'll be a future board, probably with different members. So what's happening now? Monday night is the annual town meeting. The operating budget will be presented as a contingent budget, as one contingent budget. So this is different. This is unusual. Most towns don't vote it this way. So I do want to highlight it. This means that, the finance committee voted on one budget, the selectmen presented one budget, and it will be presented to town meeting as one budget that assumes an override passes on May 17th. If town meeting votes yes on the override article, we plan to motion to take that out of order and vote on the override. If they vote yes, we'll move through the rest of the meeting. If they vote no, we will likely adjourn to a future date, or we will ask to adjourn to a future date to see how the ballot results come back in. But if town meeting passes the override, passes the budget contingent on an override, we would then go to the election. And on May 17th, the town gets to vote. If it passes, we have a balanced budget. The assumption made Monday night will carry, and all of the budget will be funded at those levels. If it fails on the 17th, the entire budget's rejected. Every department does not have a budget. We would be looking at, if we don't have a budget by July 1st, 1/12 of fiscal 25 budgeting month to month. It's very difficult to operate in. We want to avoid that. But the timeline that kicks off is that Whitman-Hanson has 30 days. They will have a rejected regional school district budget. There's state regulations they have to follow. They have 30 days to reassess the member towns, Whitman and Hanson. And then the towns then have 45 days to call a special town meeting to vote on it. The same holds true with South Shore Tech. If 4 towns reject the budget total, they will also have 30 days to act, and the towns will have 45 days to vote those budgets. It's a little convoluted, but that is this is, in our mind, this was the easiest way to present it, knowing that whether an override passed or failed, unless we assumed the exact correct budget that the school committee would assess us after the fact, we would need a special town meeting anyway. So we are taking that off the table and just saying, here's the budget with an override. If it fails, we will come back and set a new budget. Yeah.
Just quickly, Justin hit on it a bit, but I want to expand on it. The school committee has not decided on a contingency budget. So we came up with a contingency budget that is a theoretical exercise that we hope would be kind of balanced and obviously in communication with the schools, but the school committee has not voted on and said, yes, if the override fails, this is what we're going to do. So there are some, if the override doesn't pass, there are some contingencies that we can't quite account for because the decisions haven't been made yet. So if that's helpful.
Yeah. And although most of the races are uncontested, the school committee that will vote on that new budget has 6 members on the ballot on May 17th with the override. So it is not even the current school committee that will be voting on it. I thought this was an important slide. This will all be posted online afterwards if you want to look at it. But there are some tax relief options for seniors. I encourage you to contact our assessor's office if you have any questions about these. But the Clause 59 exemptions are, there's a really low threshold. So you talk through, I'm not promising that a lot of these are available, but if you are struggling, I would reach out to the assessors and find out which of these you qualify for. Senior Circuit Breaker is a state program, and I, again, forgot to update the senior tax work-off. We did just vote to increase that to $2,000 for the fiscal 26 work-off program. So that $1,500 should be $2,000. And recently we formed a taxation aid committee. I guess a town meeting in 2001 voted to establish a taxation aid committee, and the select board found that vote recently and finally established it a couple of weeks ago. So that's an interesting committee getting off the ground. Your bills in the future may see a checkbox. Would you like to donate an extra $1 to the Whitman Taxation Aid Committee? And then that committee will decide how they appropriate that money out for tax relief. All right, so really to summarize, all major departments are facing reductions if the override fails. Police, fire, DPW on the town side are going to take quite a big hit. Town hall, library, council on aging, recreation, you may see reductions in services across there. For some reason did not put the school up there, but Whitman-Hanson, obviously, 24 positions, also have a lot at stake in this override. So we'll turn it over to questions. I will, caution the same thing I did at the senior center. a lot of the people that will be, maybe not in the room right now, but that will be watching this at home, either may actually struggle to afford this override or, may have their jobs at risk if it fails. So I would ask for some civility in questions. And actually, before I turn that over, I think Kathleen has a brief statement.
So this will be brief. I'm Kathleen Otina. I'm the chair of the Whitman Finance Committee. And what I want to share with you is how things are different this year compared to last year. If you recall, fiscal 25 at town meeting, the Finance Committee had a balanced budget recommended before the town meeting that was in conflict with two budgets recommended by the selectmen. Selectmen with override, without override, and then Finance Committee without override. It was confusing. The Finance Committee recommendation did end up being adopted by the town, but we, who are town leaders, wanted to make sure, to the extent that we could, that we avoided that type of confusion in the future. So I've been meeting with Sean and Mary Beth on a regular basis since August to make sure that the lines of communication were open. Not to make deals behind closed doors, but to make sure that our concerns were shared with each other so we didn't come up to a meeting in May and have a difference of opinion. Jeff Simonek was also involved in many of those meetings. He attended many of the select board meetings and came to the Finance Committee meeting when he was invited. He's been very involved in these discussions. So what I want to emphasize is that from November 19th until April 8th, the Finance Committee met virtually every Tuesday night to debate, to meet with the department heads, and to discuss what were the requests. We also had 3 joint meetings with the Select Board, January, February, and March, to make sure that we were all pretty much on the same page. We knew we were heading for the fiscal 26 budget. In the course of wrapping up our discussions with the department heads, we finished our deliberations much earlier than we have in the past. Last year, we were meeting on Tuesdays and Thursdays up to this week before town meeting. We had the luxury this year of analyzing Article 2 and generating questions, 22 questions that the Finance Committee sent to Mary Beth Carter. She responded with the answers. And although we do not have the right to suggest cuts be made to the Whitman-Hanson Regional School budget, we sent Jeff 35 questions explicitly just to have a better sense of why certain budget line items were going up. And he and Stephen Marshall, the business manager, responded with those answers. So a lot of time has gone into analyzing all of the budgets, coming to a position where the last decision we had to make was what to recommend to the Select Board in terms of an override. And I know you've heard about the 3-year versus the 1-year. If you listen to the March 25th Finance Committee meeting, you'll hear the hour-long discussion that we engaged in, where some of us started off committed to the 3-year, because it's going to be tough getting through fiscal 27 and fiscal 28 with the $2 million override. Some of us at that same meeting started off saying, I'm not voting for any override. So we had the 2 extremes. And after listening to each other, it's a 8-member committee this year, we came to the consensus that the override that had the best chance to pass is the $2 million override that will get us through fiscal 26, get us close to fiscal 27, but there's too many unknowns to really right now, even with good predictions, we know right now exactly what the gap will be in fiscal 27. It looks like it's going to be $500,000 as we sit here today, but things can change. With the volatility of the economy, things could get better or they could get worse, and we didn't want to have a multi-year override fall short if something terrible happened to the town's finances. So I think we're going into town meeting with a much more unified vote, advice for people to make an informed decision, and I think that these forums have been helpful in terms of getting the information out to the public so that any questions that you have either have been answered or can be asked and answered in this setting. So thank you for your time tonight.
Hello, I'm Anna. I've spoken at all of these. I'm trying to ask new questions. But yeah, for anybody watching, my name is Anna, and I'm running a ballot question committee to vote yes on the override. And if you haven't heard of it yet, you can. We have a public Facebook page called Invest in Whitman, and I have taken time over the past few weeks to be able to sit down with a lot of the department heads, and you guys are all really wonderful, and you do a really good job for this town, and I just want to express my appreciation for how hard this must be, And also our town leaders are, your volunteers. Like, I'm running around, like, feeling like I have no idea what I'm doing this, and can't imagine the work that you guys put into doing this so professionally with as volunteers. So very impressed. And I also understand anytime you guys have to come to this town asking for more money, that's a stretch for a lot of us, including me. I'm not like this rich person who feels like it's totally fine giving all my money to the town. But I am someone who believes really strongly in community, supporting our town, et cetera. So I just have some clarifying questions. Some of these questions are going to be like, hey, I heard this, can you clarify it? Because I just think a lot of things like float around about what you guys are doing, because people are hearing things, but they're not taking the time to watch the work that you guys are putting into. You know, all these videos are online. I mean, is there any town budget that's not fully online? The school budget's online, the town budget's online, your department budgets are online. Like, anybody can go on there and like look and see line by line what like you're making, what that person's making. So you can see that there's not just like random money floating around doing nothing. So my questions for the select board, obviously your whole presentation was trying to answer this question, but the question people keep saying, I saw Sean Kane do such a lovely job answering one of these questions on Facebook today, but why can't the town just keep to a 2.5% increase like everybody else is expected to keep to their budget? Or why can't it just be run like a business where, we just do less? But I understand that you talked about inflation in the supply chain and the labor market, because so many of town employees and school employees are part of unions, so you have to negotiate with them. You don't have just like straight up say. But what about people who are not union? Can we just slash their salaries? What impact would that have on town services?
On the why can't we live within our budget part of the question, so yeah, we talked through a lot of the fixed costs. A lot of the expenses are increasing. If healthcare is going up, or if pensions going up 50% over 5 years, that is truly unsustainable. And I think for next year is looking to eat up like a quarter of all the revenue we expect to take in just in paying the pension obligation to Plymouth County. Likewise with health insurance, if we're looking at 10-ish% as an increase for next year, that's more than Prop 2.5 lets us raise. So those are increasing. We really don't want to be in a position where we're cutting salary and expense lines to pay fixed costs. It's a really tough spot to be in, and it's not a great way to run a town. So what we're looking at ways to control fixed costs, but also a lot of that takes bargaining, a lot of that takes time. These are our benefits promised to our employees and benefits that they have received for a long time and expect and deserve. What was the other part of your question?
Yeah, I think that answered it. My impression is that if you just started paying people less, they'd go somewhere else, and then we'd have a hard time.
And we have experienced that
maintaining our employees.
So there are some of our departments that we know are below market value, and we do tend to turn them over much quicker than other departments. The DPW's brought it up in the past. That a lot of our employees will come here, get a CDL, and go work for utility.
Yeah, I met with Bruce today, and that was what he told me.
Yeah. So but there are some departments that we know are below market value, and we would like to adjust, but we're not asking to do that in this override because we know it's not the time to ask.
Okay. I think there's been a misunderstanding about the override being forever, with some thinking that means our new percentage rate that you're levying each year is now going to be increased above 2.5%. My understanding is that with an override, you're doing a bigger percentage for that fiscal year, setting a new base levy. And then subsequent years, it's 2.5% again and again until you do another override.
Correct. Up to 2.5, yeah.
Up to 2.5, yeah.
Yeah. Although in recent years, we have not left a lot of excess levy. We've been trying to spend to that limit. But yeah, your belief is correct. So we're allowed to assess 2.5% increases on the total levy capacity. The override vote raises that levy capacity by $2 million, so then it increases more than that 2.5%. And then future increases will be on top of that new levy, 2.5% going forward.
Yeah, so it's not like a debt exclusion where it's separate from the levy and then that comes and goes. Like it's a new base.
Yeah.
And that stays
It's a new base.
technically forever.
The town could opt to vote an underride and reduce that levy. I don't believe any town in the history of Prop 2.5 has done that. But it is an option of it. Most towns, if they choose to, if they have more levy capacity than more levy capacity than they need, they'll just leave that excess levy for future years if they ever need it.
Okay. I have also heard people saying that the select board and finance committee will just take the money anyway. Please describe how this is impossible.
I can't think of a way that we can just take the money anyway. I mean, we're coming to ask the voters to raise the levy as an option. I know we're walking a fine line here not to advocate for the override, just to lay out the options. What we do in our personal time is different, but at least here, we are trying to present the facts. This is what we stand to gain or stand to lose on an override. I can't think of a mechanism that we could just...
Yeah. Which circles back to my first question of like, why can't we keep the level of services we've come to expect, which Sean was talking about earlier, without raising above 2.5%?
I think some of the confusion lies with home assessments. And I'm not the best person to answer this, but I think the general perception or misperception is if the home assessments in Whitman are increased, they're assessed at a higher rate, then they can collect more money. And that's not the case. So I think clearing up some of that misperception, just because your home increased in assessment, that doesn't mean that the town can collect more money. And how that's connected to new growth. Maybe Justin.
Yeah, so the way that works, if your assessment increases because you either added something or the value of your neighbors decreased, that is still the cumulative, all taxable property can only go up 2.5% every year. So something that we saw during COVID, I don't know that we've explicitly done a study on this, but I believe it, is that the last 5-year reassessment, the last big town reassessment for all the properties was during the COVID crisis. During that time, we saw a lot of our commercial property values drop, but because the cumulative taxable property in the town was allowed to go up 2.5%, that shifted some of the burden to the homeowners, away from the industrial and commercial property that we're seeing a reduction in their assessed values. I am hopeful that may swing back the other way now that everything's back open. That was poor timing on the last reassessment, but so there's an ebb and flow on where assessments are going. If you add a garage, your assessment goes up more than 2.5% because that's new growth, but then that gets washed into the base, and it increases from there year over year.
Yeah.
I
do think that the confusion was more around like the levy percentage and not around home assessment values.
Yeah, something a good thing to highlight there. I think it's Duxbury's. So our tax rate's around $13. I think we're $13.12 dollars per 1,000 square foot. Duxbury's about $10, or Norwell's about there. Martha's Vineyard's like $2. So because home values are higher, doesn't mean that they're able to tax more. It just means that they have to reduce their tax rate so that the taxable income stays within the 2.5 limits.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I have 3 questions about the schools. So there's been some hearsay that sort of comes up about the school budget. You guys were answering about the difference in budgets between town departments and the school district, that the school district handles all of their fixed costs. They handle their facilities fees and retirements and all of those things, which for other town departments, you were saying come through the town, the town budget as opposed to the department budget. So when you look at increases between schools and other departments, that's a huge difference in why the schools, 1, are just more, and 2, increase more exponentially. If you're looking at fixed costs for the town and then fixed costs for the schools, and they're both increasing, it's for the same reason. But there have been some specific things, like where did the money come from to hire all of those staff during COVID, or where did the money come from to hire another superintendent or another assistant superintendent? So those are related, and maybe Jeff could answer those?
So thank you for those questions. Going over a few things, and I appreciate your slides showing the fixed costs that we have. Because on that slide, our fixed costs are health insurance, retirement, and just to clarify, we don't pay anything into certified professionals or certified teachers. We don't pay anything into MTRS. However, Plymouth County are non-certified staff members. So anyone from a paraprofessional to the guy that cuts the grass isn't part of Plymouth County. And that's about a 50-50 split within our district out of our 600. Okay, so
Wow.
that's one of our costs that go out that we have no control over. Good question about COVID funds, because we did get a slew of money in ESSER funding over that time frame. And I think we used it appropriately to manage what we needed at the time, really since 2016 of that failed override of the Make Schools Better, or I know the SOS group. So I broke this down for the school committee last year, and we actually lost one more this year, excuse me. Positions gained and lost since fiscal 21. This doesn't include paraprofessionals, since those numbers are specific to special education and fluctuate. This also doesn't include replacements for retirees or staff members that had left. We added 4 district interventionists, 1 elementary ELA, 1 elementary math, 1 secondary math, and 1 secondary ELA. We lost a secondary ELA interventionist who became a reading specialist through a vacancy at Whitman Middle School and Hanson Middle School. It was a split. We did not replace that position. We hired 2 district-wide interventionists, and we go, and I credit Mr. Kane for this because he talks about best practice. So I threw in legal, what we need, and best practice. So we hired 2 district-wide interventionists to look at data, which is legal and best practice. We hired 1 elementary education coordinator who left, and the salary became our HR director. So prior to 2022, the district that employed close to 600 people had nobody in human resources. It's best practice to have that person. All these positions were also approved by our school committees over the past few years. We hired 1 middle school special education coordinator whose salary is now the new assistant superintendent of equity and compliance. That person was a director, and because we did lose this year a IT director, I have no IT director and no facilities director. The other assistant superintendent took over those 2 departments, as well as doing other tasks as the assistant superintendent. Needed and best practice. The compliance aspect of this position now has greatly increased to the point that we're at legal risk if that person is not reviewing what goes out for compliance between the state and the federal government. We did hire 5 building-based math interventionists, 1 at Conley, 1 at Duval, 1 at Whitman Middle School and Hanson Middle School, a split, and 1 at Indian Head and Hanson Middle School. Again, best practice. We hired 1 nurse, high school preschool, because after 2018, when the preschool moved to the high school, we only had 1 nurse there, and we have severe medical needs of kids within the district. I said this at the Hanson Senior Center Forum. Our medical needs have increased substantially to the point that students 10 years ago would have not ever attended public school. They would have been in an out-of-district placement or a hospital setting, are now in our system and in our schools. We hired 1 preschool teacher due to the need and special education requirements. I cannot help when I have more students that have severe special needs when we're legally bound to educate them in early or as of age 3. We added 1 district family liaison because of the language issue within our community where I'm standing now. We have close to 240 EL students that live within the town of Whitman, and we needed somebody to help with that interpretation. We added 6 English language staff members, exactly what I just spoke to, and those are teachers and tutors because we're legally bound to educate students who English is not their first language. We hired 1 music teacher, although there was no hit to the budget because 2 people retired, and I was actually able to replace 3 of those, 3 teachers with the price of 2. So we added a middle school band teacher and music teacher. I hired 1 after-school coordinator, although no impact to the budget. This was totally grant funded. We hired 1 occupational therapist. We had hired a district person versus a contracted service person who worked for another company because it was fiscally, we already needed that position, but it was fiscally more economical. That was a total of 18 positions. 3 positions were gained without impact to the budget. And in that time, as of fiscal 25, 7 positions were lost. As of fiscal 26, it's 8. 1 director of facilities, 1 director of instructional technology, 1 groundskeeper, and last year there were 5 non-renewals, resignations, or retirements. So it's a total of 11 positions, actually 10 positions affecting the fiscal 26 position from fiscal 21. But those were already added for fiscal 25. I think I answered the assistant superintendent question
You did.
in that as well.
Yes, definitely.
Other question for me? Was there a third?
I believe so. So there's some talk in the town about the balance of loss that stands to happen between departments. That when you look at a department who stands to lose like 30% of their workforce, and the school district, if the override doesn't pass, you only stand to lose maybe 4%. Obviously, we don't know what the recommendation of the school committee is going to be and what you're going to have to work with based on what they say. But why does that happen? Why is there a difference there? Like, why can't you stand to lose more people?
So in that slide, I think we were up to 24 positions. And I must also explain, out of that 24 positions, for the $2 million deficit that I stand right now, I have to add positions for unemployment. So every person that we pink slip or reduction, who receives a reduction in force, it's a 40% of their salary insurance base that I have to cover. So though, if we get anywhere close to the assessment that was assigned by the school committee to the town, if it's not the entire 2 million, that number will go down. But I think it's always been shown in both communities that the school budget is a bigger piece of the pie.
Yep.
And the differential will never be equitable. The district will always take a bigger hit because we have a bigger piece of the pie. Yes?
I think it should also be mentioned that we'll be losing $100,000 in stipended positions and $400,000 in curriculum.
So that's the assistant superintendent, Mr. Farrow, who's also a Whitman taxpayer and has been in town since 2003. He's correct. I didn't mention the cuts in the fee increase as well. I will be reducing the athletic budget by $250,000. And if the school committee approves an increase of athletic fees from $250 for your first sport, $50 for each additional, to a $500 per sport fee with no family cap. Again, all this is subject to school committee approval. Mr. Kane and Mr. Evans did talk about a contingency budget, which was not approved by the school committee, but in good faith, I presented the school committee with a contingency budget based upon the numbers that were presented to me at one of the finance committee and select board meetings.
Would you also say that reducing staff any further would make it impossible for you to meet your legal obligation to educate the children?
Nothing.
Well,
The doors are going to open August 28th, and teachers are going to teach. Whether there's 22 students in a classroom, 18 students, or 26 in a classroom, our teachers will do their legal obligation. However, they might miss those tweener kids that aren't being serviced either in high academics or through special education. Special education costs and transportation costs are also a fixed cost for us that fluctuates, that I'm legally bound to educate those students. And I think on your slide with general education, Justin, you mentioned South Shore Vocational, which we're a partner of, but we also, the town sends students to Norfolk Agricultural, the bane of the finding transportation of Miss Carter's existence, of finding transportation to Bristol Aggie and Norfolk Aggie. Yeah. And those tuitions right now are close to $30,000 per student without transportation, and the town owns that. But it's part of the general education budget, and that's why you might see a little bit more of that increase of 35%. It's not just Whitman-Hanson Regional High School or Regional School District.
Yeah. The Senior Center, we all had a really great discussion about a lot of things, and we heard from a lot of people for whom an increase will be a major struggle. And I don't think there's anybody in this room who's for or against the override who doesn't have utmost empathy for the situation that some people may face with increase. But that wasn't televised, correct?
No, it wasn't.
Yeah. So there was some really great discussion that day about why it's important for a town to ensure that we are educating our children well. One, because it's our civic obligation, both legally and some would say morally. And also the savings to the town that can be sort of seen over time by ensuring that the schools in town are where a parent like myself wants to actually send their children because it's a good school. I'm hoping maybe we could, because I don't think that we had that discussion during the first override, which was televised, and I thought it might be nice to have that sort of on record tonight.
Yeah, and I think you said it, but and Jeff mentioned it, but it is the best bang for our buck right now for us educating a student is Whitman Hanson. They are the lowest per pupil cost. A little lower than South River Tech, a lot lower than Norfolk and Bristol Aggie, lower than the charter schools that we would send our students to. So I think having an effective Whitman Hanson Regional School District that parents want to send their kids to and kids want to go to does benefit us financially as well as civically.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, all the departments had a really great opportunity during the first override forum to share, what the benefit is to the town to be able to sort of spend a little bit of money to make sure that you're well staffed, save a little bit of money, if the police or the fire department are bringing people in from mutual aid, then, we're paying for that. Or if they can't run the second ambulance, there's a loss in revenue. So I think just revisiting that really quickly, I think is helpful. And then I spoke with the library the other day. It was a lovely discussion. And, but I don't think we've heard from him at a forum. And I was hoping that maybe you or he could talk about what the library stands to lose.
Certainly let David Aronson, our library director, can speak to that.
Thank you, David.
So as many of you know, we have a pretty small crew at the library. Something that people may not know is that libraries are required to be certified by the state. There are a range of statutory requirements that apply to library certification, including things like open hours. Again, we do have a small crew, and we have been operating with a vacancy since one of our staff members retired. It's very challenging to try to keep the doors open as it is right now, pulling in a lot of substitute staffing and whatnot. Because of the size of the community, we're required to be open 50 hours a week. There are provisions in the law if we were to have to reduce our staff that would give us the option to apply for waivers and things like that. But the town has to demonstrate by year 2 what the plan is to try to restore full funding to the library. So obviously, if you have young kids, we do quite a lot with that. We have huge program numbers for our small, our youth programs in particular. It will definitely have an impact if the override fails and we end up needing to not fill our vacancies or to otherwise reduce staffing. It will almost certainly cause us to have to cut the hours, and obviously that will be an impact to the community. So,
what's the material circulation currently in the library?
the circulation, I think we're sort of in the 40-ish thousand range. Circulation is not, where we're seeing the most growth actually is in the foot traffic. Our program numbers, we do 2 story times a week. Post-COVID immediately, so Mondays and Thursdays we have story time. Post-COVID we might see 8 to 10 kids. Now there are lots of weeks where we have 30 to 50. Our special programs, we just had a birthday party for NOLA. There were 100 people there. So we're really seeing a lot of interest and engagement certainly with the children's side. And then on the adult side, we're running programs every week. We're, we're pretty busy and we have a lot of people using our study rooms. We just got a whole bunch of new computers, thanks to Josh and Steve, which have been a real help. So we've got people in there doing those types of things. So, the resources are being used in different ways than they were previously. And anyway.
So what happens if you do reduce below 50 hours?
So we would have to, if we drop below 50, which is our required minimum due to the population size of the town, we would have to apply for a waiver from the state. The state would also decrease the amount of state aid that we get in proportion to the size of the cut in our hours. The way the waiver process works, you have up to 5 years, but by year 2, the community has to present a plan to the Board of Library Commissioners, who are the people from the state body that distributes state aid, for how the community intends to restore full funding. And then after that, every subsequent year, the community has to demonstrate progress towards achieving that goal of returning to, compliance. So it's an ongoing process, and obviously if we were to cut the budget and then have to rebuild it, especially given that salaries go up, year by year contractually, most of our staff are unionized, so that's part of the picture. There is a cost there.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I think those were the last of my questions. I don't know, at the first override, you kind of had everybody get up and have their say. So if we're not going to do that, then I would urge anybody watching this one to go back and watch the other departments speak, because, my perspective with meeting with everybody, and I think this is what they were communicating, police and fire and schools, everybody's just literally excelling at what they do with just really not enough to do what they're already doing. And so asking from my perspective for the money to just continue at least providing what you're providing is a reasonable decision for us to make as a town. So thank you, all of you, for everything that you do.
Thanks. Does anybody else have questions for the select board or any of the department heads?
Hi, my name's Mark. I'm a Whitman resident. So I couldn't exactly hear what was answered, but this override is going to be a permanent increase, correct?
So this is permanently raising the levy, so yes.
And then next year, we're going to have South Shore VOTEC money on top of that.
South Shore VOTEC will probably hit the year after. We will probably authorize it
Well,
next
yeah.
year, and then the following year but yes, that'll be coming.
And then there could be potentially another 2.5% every year as we go along.
On the levy, not on the capital costs, but yes.
Okay. Is there any way we can ask the state to increase their help?
We do. I think
With the town?
Our state reps and state senator are
This is probably not the correct.
very responsive to us when we ask, and it doesn't go anywhere year over year. But yeah, we're having those discussions. It's different buckets right now. So it's the Chapter 78 that's relatively flat due to just the formula. We'd like them to change the formula. They changed it in 2018 or 19. It did not help. So that's probably the biggest chunk of money the town gets in state aid, but that goes to the school district. For the other aid, it's the biggest places we're able to pull in is earmarks, and it's small projects here and there, usually capital costs, one-time things.
Yeah, because it seemed by your chart, everything went up except for the state aid, pretty much.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to read that.
I'm wondering, what the reasoning is for that. I know it's not you guys. Just doesn't seem correct, that's all.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you. I think
you.
the young lady asked most of the questions I was going to ask.
All right. Anybody else? Thanks. All right. I think we're all set. So thank you for coming. I appreciate everyone taking the time, everyone watching at home. And please come back Monday night, May 5th at 7:30 for annual town meeting.